Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I'm your host Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
I guess I always go first, so I'll keep that trend up. Doing well. Kind of had a couple of games last week where it felt like we escaped. um, but we talked up earlier this season. Gave our predictions for SEC for conference play, and it's really hard for obviously any of these games coming up, the rest of the season are losable. But at the same time, to start 9-1, you really like the kind of leg up that we have right now heading into this second half. So overall, there's a lot of optimism. But boy, howdy, we're about to talk about these games that we have coming up. It's not going to get any easier, and looking forward to talking about it with you guys.
It's crazy to think that we're almost two-thirds of the way through the season. It seems like we haven't had a bunch of home games. Obviously, we had the month off from Tuscaloosa, basically with the to start the year with the game against Illinois and Birmingham, and now we're sitting here basically at this point now having a week and a half, but 2 weeks in between having home games of Georgia and Auburn, and still feeling like this team's got a lot to prove. But as I mentioned on the space, I thought the game Saturday against Georgia, how they really took control in the second half, could be a turning point for this team. There just seemed to be a different attitude about the team, that it wasn't just you know, escaping, the game in Mississippi State, holding on and getting what is still a really good win against what was the number 14 team in the country with their best player having a career night. But to not lay an egg basically in the game Saturday at home against Georgia. You had a few minutes there, of course, where went into a scoring drought or maybe just wasn't hitting on all cylinders like you would like to see for a full 40 minutes. But it was really nice to see that when we turn it on, we can turn it on. And, that moment where, you know, Mike White gets the technical, Sears hits the two free throws, Diabate gets a dunk off the inbounds pass. We either get a stop or a steal, and Sears hits the three, and that's when Mike White calls the timeout. But as Sears is running back down the court, he's running in front of the student section and getting them going, and other players are getting them going, and we just haven't really had a lot of those moments like we're kind of accustomed to over the past 2 years, where Sears or a couple of guys hit a few big threes and really gets the student section involved, or Brandon Miller had a big dunk, and he's over messing with the student section and stuff like that. The crowds in Coleman have been anticipating that moment to really blow the roof off the hangar, and it felt like it finally came on Saturday, but it feels like there's still a lot more to do in Coleman Coliseum. And obviously, we got some big games in Coleman for the second half of the SEC slate as well.
Yeah, I don't know how many Alabama only has like what, three home games left?
Four, I
Four
believe.
Four,
home games, and it
all
just feels
all against ranked teams.
yeah, it just feels like this season. Initially, like in December, I was like, man, this season's going by really slow. And all of a sudden, like in the blink of an eye, like you're in February and you have NCAA tournament basketball next month. And it just feels like we've kind of lost, not lost, but kind of just the season's kind of vanished. And especially the SEC season. I mean, Joey, when you're saying that we're sitting here 8-1. I can't even believe that we've already played nine SEC games so far.
Mhm.
And I personally I appreciate where our bye kind of landed. I know Auburn had their bye early in the SEC conference play where I think they only played like three games or three or four games and then immediately had a bye. I love that Alabama gets a break at the very middle of the SEC play so you can kind of reset, refocus. Um, they went and played golf yesterday or mini golf yesterday. I believe that Grant Nelson beat Nate Oates, from what I was told. And it's just I feel like it's a really good mental reset for the team. And you can kind of evaluate where you sit halfway through the season. You're a game off of first place, technically a half game because Auburn's a game behind, but you're essentially a game off because they're undefeated. Um, and you really you've won every game, and the Ole Miss game was very winnable for Alabama, and ultimately, the things that we were kind of talking about at the beginning of the season kind of reared their heads, and you lose a game that you probably should have won. But if you would have told me going into the bye week, when we were in non-conference play, that Alabama would be 8-1, I mean, I would have taken that any day of the week, especially with road wins over A&M, road wins over Kentucky, over Mississippi State. Um, just all in all, just a really good, solid first half of the SEC for Alabama, and there's still a lot to work on, right? It's not like Alabama's a finished product. It's not like we're completely satisfied with what this team looks like right now, but you can see the improvement week in and week out, or game to game, that they're kind of getting their footing, figuring it out, and getting comfortable within their roles. Um, Go ahead, Joey.
Well, I was just gonna say, going back to what you were saying about the Ole Miss loss, even with that, like that loss matters as far as standings are concerned, like in the conference. But outside of that, what we said was true in that it being bookended between those two crucial road wins, like, against was it Texas A&M and Kentucky. Everybody's completely forgotten about that at this point. It in the grand scheme of things, as far as tournament resume, ultimately didn't matter, and it served honestly as a way. If they had won that game, you really don't know if they're going to win Saturday just because of the mentality of the team and that mindset. So overall, that loss came at a perfect time. That goes hand in hand with the break. There's a reason we're recording on Tuesday night right now and not Monday like normal. We have Bama's off this midweek, so um, let's see, we have what 9 quad 1 games left out of 9, so there's still a lot to go. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up that Ole Miss loss is it's looking like that was kind of a perfectly timed loss.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think when we did the podcast recording and when we talked about it on the space, like we had asked the question, if you had to go 1-1, would you have taken the Ole Miss loss or the Kentucky loss? And a bunch of people said Kentucky, but I almost feel like if Alabama would have squeaked out that win and figured out a way to win, it doesn't serve the same purpose as a loss the way that they lost on their home court, kind of resetting the team, um, and really trying to understand that, like in this SEC, especially this year more than any other year in the past, like you have to bring your A game. And did they bring their A game in the following games? Yes, versus Kentucky, I think they played extremely well, but like it's still there was times where Alabama maybe didn't play as great, and you think like moving forward, like you said, Joey, there's 9 quad 1 games left on Alabama's schedule. I think we were talking about it before we started recording. The last like what 4 or 5 games are all versus ranked opponents, right? With Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri. I think those are Alabama's, not in that order, but just those teams are the final, I think, 6 games of Alabama's schedule. So really for Alabama, that Ole Miss loss, I think kind of proves that you can't take a night off. Like I don't think Alabama's going to come out specifically flat versus Missouri following the Auburn game. Now, could they potentially? Yeah, but I think that they're gonna take Missouri a little bit more seriously than maybe they would have if they hadn't lost to Ole Miss. Um,
So you got, I shared with you guys earlier today that I've been mathing pretty hard over the past few days since our break does fall perfectly where we are halfway through the season. So, share some things with y'all, for your reactions. Probably not surprising to either one of y'all that we are losing the turnover margin by 37. We have 125 turnovers through our first 9 games. Our opponents only have 88. One of the things that we have talked about is just the live ball turnovers. About 66% of our turnovers are live ball turnovers. Teams getting a steal, getting out and running, so our defense isn't necessarily set. But we've done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of limiting points off turnovers. For every turnover we have, an opponent's scoring 0.81 points, where the turnovers that we generate are generating 1.17 points per turnover. So I find that pretty positive. I was actually surprised that on offensive rebounds, we have 122 and our opponents have 123. But then when you look at our field goal percentages overall, we're shooting 48% in conference play and our opponents are shooting 41%. That was still a little surprising to me. Just I know we've had some struggles as far as offensive rebounds or giving up offensive rebounds. Um, but obviously, our opponents are having a lot better, more chances to go get an offensive rebound. And I think that also kind of shows that while it may not always show up in like the KenPom numbers or points per game or anything like that, we are doing some pretty good things defensively as far as forcing difficult shots or forcing shots that are tough to make with teams shooting about 42, 41% against us. But being able, of course, to clean up those rebounds and get out and run and do what we need to do, especially that we're now in conference play, hitting about 37% from the 3-point line, is only going to make those margins of victory for us bigger. And as coach said, and he said this way, when he got to Alabama, you know, our 3-point shooting should only dictate the margin of victory, not whether we win or lose or not. Our defense should dictate whether we win or lose. And as we've seen in some of these games, especially these last two where we've shot the ball really well from three, you're starting to see that, of course, in the margin of victory. And last thing, just because I griped a lot about free throw shooting last year, or the disparity between how many attempts we were getting at the free throw line compared to our opponents. Halfway through conference play, we sit here with 251 free throw attempts to our opponents 201. And we're actually, even though we do talk about, a lot of missed free throws, we're shooting about 71% from the line where our opponents are shooting 67%. So yeah, I put on my Nate Oates math this week and just wanted to dive into some of these analytics and kind of look for some things or just some trends or just where are we being really successful and where are some things that we need to clean up, which we know it's clean up the defensive glass, prevent the other team from getting more offensive rebounds, take care of the ball, and be a really good first shot defense and continue to get out and run and do the things that we're successful.
Yeah, I
Charles,
think
I never thought I'd see the day where you mathematically prove that Bama does indeed get all the calls.
Yeah, our checks have been arriving to Birmingham, it seems like.
well, I think over the season, and I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure I heard this on the broadcast. Alabama's like second in the country in free throws attempted. Mark Sears is on pace to break the SEC record for free throws attempted in a season pretty significantly. And I want to mention something about the defense. There's been a lot said and a lot of takes about Alabama's defense this season, mainly because last year Alabama's defense was not very good, and ultimately, to be quite frank, it didn't really matter. Alabama went to the Final Four with a lackluster defense, right? Nate Oates historically has said that his system and the way that he runs his offense is predicated on the defense, getting the stops, getting in transition, and running out, hitting threes, getting the free throw line, getting layups. But he wants to be focused on the defensive end. That's why the blue collar points are a thing. It's not offensively, you're not really going to get blue collar points, right? Offensive rebounds would probably be one way, loose balls would be another way. But you're not going to get blue collar points by making 3-point shots. That's not how the system works. It's solely or almost statistically predicated on how you perform defensively. And this season, I think Alabama has played better defense than what their metrics show. I think what Alabama's fallen into is these 10-minute, 5-minute lapses in defense that have kind of inflated their defensive metrics, or deflated, I guess it wouldn't be inflated, deflated their defensive metrics to the point where it looks on paper like Alabama's an average defense, when in reality, Alabama plays really good defense for 30 minutes of the game, but for 10 minutes of the game, Alabama forgets how to play defense. And so if Alabama can ever figure out how to put together 35 minutes of really good defense, or maybe 37 minutes of really good defense, because I don't think it's a great expectation for them to play an amazing defense for 40 minutes. Even when we had the third ranked defense in the country two times in a row, like that they didn't do that all the time. Um, then I think this team's just has so much more ceiling and so much more room to be like this elite level team. And that's crazy that we're saying that when Alabama is currently projected as the number 2 overall seed in Joe Lunardi's bracket, and we're saying Alabama's still got a lot more to grow and work on. So, um, for all of you defense deniers, I think Alabama's defense has actually been pretty good this season.
And I think those numbers are only going that Charles was bringing up. I think those numbers are only going to improve because when you take into account that Chris Youngblood wasn't on the court for half of those numbers, you have Phylon who was started out strong. His offense is kind of tapered, but his defensive effort is still there. You have Mo Diabate who's come on strong. He's been great all year, but he's really come into his own the past couple of weeks. Um, I think that you're going to see market improvement in those numbers when you just consider this team was this team is still. I mean, yeah, you have Wrightsell out, which is going to hurt the offensive numbers, but as far as defense goes, the coming of age of those three players will really help in this second half here.
And one offensive statistic that I don't feel like we've spent a ton of time on this year, but it's the best it's ever been under Nate Oates, is how well we're sharing the basketball that are leading to baskets. Our assists per field goal makes this year is 56%. So over half of the time we make a basket, it's probably coming off an assist. I think our total assist numbers are on average around 17 a game. And just the pressure that continues to put on teams, especially with how spaced out we are and how much we do try to drive to the paint and get rim looks and stuff like that. You're just always going to have a defense basically playing on skates out there, and they're always going to have to be, switching, scrambling, whatever they're doing. But being able, one, you got to make the shot, of course, to get the assist. And I think we're starting to, of course, make shots from the 3-point line where we were getting good looks. So hopefully those assist numbers continue to go up. But with the improvement on the defensive side, even though our turnover numbers are up from last year, that we're just attacking maybe a little bit differently than what we've done in the past, or just been able to share the ball a little bit more than just trying to get a rim run or trying to get to the free throw line or shoot a three, kick out a three or one pass or anything like that. But that's something too that's also kind of stuck out to me as it relates to just the offense of just how well this team is sharing the ball with each other, and getting good looks. And we're now finally starting to knock down those good looks.
Well, Alabama's the highest scoring team in the country currently, with them only shooting, I think last I checked was like 33% from three as a team, right? And a lot of the shots that we've missed have been open. Like a lot of 3-point shots have been pretty wide open. And so you just think about it from an offensive perspective, if we can improve the offensive rebounding, which is what we were so successful doing in non-conference. I mean, we were like a top 5 team in offensive rebound percentage going into SEC play. I haven't checked the KenPom stats since then. But if you can improve the offensive rebounding and then you continue to shoot the 40+%, okay, I won't say 40+% because if you shoot, there's no way that the team can maintain a 40% 3-point shooting, number. But if we get up to 37%, 36% 3-point shooting, well, Alabama, who's averaging 90 plus points a game, suddenly goes from that number to 95, 90, 96 points a game, which is absurd. And I don't think that that's ultimately going to happen. I think that that's kind of an absurd number to think about Alabama potentially getting up to 95 points a game, but it's feasible if they continue on the type of shooting that they have been doing, as well as the offensive rebounding that they brought in the non-conference. Well, looking forward, I think we've kind of already talked a little bit about it, but how do you guys see Alabama finishing the SEC play?
I think what was my original prediction? It was
13-5, I
13
believe.
and 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have 9 games left.
I said 11-6, by the way. or
Yeah,
11
no,
and
I remember I was the most optimistic of
yeah.
the group after thinking I was going to be the most pessimistic. I really think these next two games are winnable. They are both on the road, but I think they're both winnable games. I mean, Arkansas coming off of that very emotional win against Kentucky for Cal. I think Bama's going to be able to get that one. Texas is still an SEC team, but they're not having the year that they probably would have liked overall. But then, like you said, Christian, those final, what is it, six games? Actually, it's 7 games if you count Auburn twice. Final 7 games of the season are all ranked. Um, at Missouri has always been tough under Oates. um, I think that could be I think if I had to pick like an unexpected loss, it would be that one out of that group. Um, but then I really, just kind of generalize, summarize it up. I really could see this team, at worst 6-3. At best, I think they go 8-1 this final stretch, kind of repeat the first half. I think they're going to get a loss in there somewhere. But I really think that around 7-2 or 6-3 is just more realistic, and that wouldn't be a bad thing. Yes, it means you're probably not going to be the number one seed. You're not going to win the regular season, a title, but at the same time, with all of those games being ranked, like those aren't really going to tarnish your resume that much. I mean, at worst, you probably fall to a 3 seed, but even then, that's probably, considering how tough the conference is this year, you might fall to just a 2 seed with a couple of SEC losses. So overall, if I have to get a final prediction, I'll go 6-3 for these final 9 games.
I think worst case scenario of going something like a 5-4 will still secure you a double bye in the SEC, which will be really important. Um, I'll save my comments for Arkansas because we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just thinking about the game against Texas, and they've got a lottery pick player in Trey Johnson. We've struggled at times with teams that are really led by one guy like Josh Hubbard or Eagle Staff at North Dakota. So, do we have a game plan that kind of, slows him down and all that? I do like just to talk about, that time between the Arkansas and the Texas game, that the team is going straight from Fayetteville to Austin. They're going to watch the Super Bowl together. I think that's cool. I think that's good to not have to go back and forth between Tuscaloosa. Hopefully continue to build some good chemistry on a trip like that. Then, of course, you got the game that everybody's been talking about since, gosh, like the summer of last year, or just one of these games going against Auburn. Um, you know, expect College Game Day to be there. It's the first time that playing Auburn on a Saturday, since they probably instituted the 3-point line, it feels like. It'll obviously it's obviously a huge game, and win or lose, with this stretch, of course, it's just how do you come out of that game mentally, physically? Like you said, Joey, then you got the game at Missouri, which could be a very sleepy game as far as being 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I think it's actually good that it is a Wednesday and not a Tuesday game, that it's a quick turnaround, that you have another day to kind of recalibrate. But then you also got to get ready for Kentucky that Saturday, who's going to have something to prove because of what we did in Lexington. And then you got another dogfight, pun intended, against Mississippi State the following week. And you got to go up to Knoxville, and the physicality that they play with, especially up there that we've seen. Florida, it has struggled a little bit recently, even though they're still number 6 in the country. I mean, obviously they got blown out over the weekend at Tennessee, struggled at South Carolina. So we'll kind of see what that game's like towards the end of the season. Will also be an emotional game because it's going to be Mark Sears' last game in Coleman Coliseum, Grant Nelson as well. And then, of course, you're finishing up at Auburn, maybe playing for an SEC regular season championship, maybe not. So I mean, all these games are tough. Um, I look at it as, you need to go 5-4 at a minimum, and you're only playing 4 home games. It's still wild to me the success that we've had on the road this year and just in general with Coach Oates, when we went about 2 decades with never being able to win on the road in the SEC. Um, I mean, look, I'll tell you, I think 9-0 is possible. But 6-3, 7-2, probably a little bit more realistic, especially having to go to Auburn, to Tennessee. Like the other three road games are very winnable if you approach them the right way. Of course, and then if we start playing better at home, we take some of the momentum we got in the second half against Georgia and start games well and continue to clean up some of these things, then you should be able to win every single one of your home games too. So final prediction, I'll say 6-3 for this final stretch and let them surpass my expectations again, which is also kind of wild as we sit here that, have been maybe a little bit down on this team at times, but they continue to surpass the expectations or the bars that we set as far as, 10-3 in the non-conference. Well, they go to 11-2, 6-3 or 7-2 to start the first half of the SEC play. Well, they're 8-1. Like it's it's sometimes hard to gauge this team because they are winning a lot of games, but maybe you just like to see the product on the floor be a lot cleaner than what we're accustomed to, of course, under Coach Oates and all that. But yeah, I think 6-3 would be my expectations for this second half stretch.
Well, I'll be the first one to say that I think my prediction was 11-7 going into SEC play. I don't think that prediction is going to happen. I think they're going to be better than that. Just my assumption. If they go 3-6 in this back half, then shoot, something really bad I think had to have happened. I think that this Arkansas game, which we'll talk about just after this, is going to show me a lot about this team. I feel like I say that after every single week, but these next two games, Arkansas, at Tennessee, like these or at Texas, these are games you have to win, right? I know they're on the road. I know that they're going to be in tough environments, but you have to win these two games because the next 7 games are ranked opponents against really good teams in some really difficult environments. But I think 6-3 is right on the number. That's right where I'm at. I think personally, I will tell you the losses. I think you lose at Missouri. I think you lose at Auburn, and I think you lose at Tennessee. I think those are the 3 losses that Alabama has. I think you win at home, finish out their home schedule with only 1 loss. But I think that those 3 games are going to be very tough. I think the Missouri game is going to be tough because you're coming off an emotional Auburn game with College Game Day. I think that the Tennessee game is going to be tough because you're coming off a physical game versus Mississippi State, and I think that I think it's tough. And I'll say this as an Alabama fan, it's almost impossible to win in Neville Arena. Um, and I think Alabama's done it like twice in the past 6 years or something like that, maybe once. But I think if the SEC is on the line, that place is going to be absolutely insane. And I would love for this team to prove me wrong. I find it hard to see. But I mean, I will perfectly take a 14-4 record in SEC play, which is what 6-3 will get you. And you'll probably have a double bye in the SEC tournament, and probably a top 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, which I think is perfectly happy.
Because we're previewing the whole schedule, and I know we're going to talk a lot about Auburn next week when that game is coming up in Tuscaloosa. But since we're previewing the whole second half, I agree. The environment for that last game in Auburn will be crazy. I believe the environment in Tuscaloosa a week and a half from now will be crazy. I've told several people this. It would not shock me if Alabama and Auburn split the series this year where the road team gets the win. Somewhat similar to what Arkansas did against Kentucky last Saturday, where, one, Arkansas was very motivated for other reasons, guys that played at Kentucky and wanting to play for their coach. But can you be mentally mature enough in those environments and not let them take over your emotions? And I don't think that necessarily happened to that Kentucky team, but I've been in enough games in Coleman Coliseum where things go a little bit sideways, even when Alabama's winning, and you can kind of see the nervousness and anxiousness start going into former Alabama teams. one thing about this team, somewhat similar to last year's team, is they don't seem to play with a lot of emotion or, fall apart when things are going bad or anything like that, especially with some of the runs that we've given up. So for us, maybe that does give us some comfort as far as playing in Tuscaloosa for that game. Um, Auburn's always emotional. Auburn's always got guys that are emotional. So can they handle those emotions on a senior day, last game of the year, possibility playing for an SEC regular season championship? We'll see. I'm sure there's many Auburn fans that, oh yeah, we can play with those emotions. Well, they weren't able to handle their emotions on an airplane flight earlier this year. So we'll see.
Well, I will say this, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on Auburn. We are going to be talking about them next week. One thing that Alabama does that's going to make Auburn fans and Auburn players really mad when we play them, Alabama gets to the line. Alabama gets foul calls. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to look like for the officiating, right? I think that there's a lot to do with the officiating and who's going to be. Please, for the love of God, do not give us Pat Adams for either of those games. I just don't want to see it. But also, when foul calls don't go your way, how each team responds is going to be crucial, right? Does Alabama get in their head, display some type of like emotion, disappointment, anger, whatever, because they're not getting foul calls? Does Auburn do that? Because I think that like that's a type of mental toughness that the team's going to have in an environment and in a game that's going to be this high of stakes. I don't think, again, this is the last thing I'm going to say on Auburn, and we can talk about this next week. I don't think that there's going to be an Iron Bowl of basketball in the history of Alabama versus Auburn that is ever going to have this much stakes as the final game of the regular season and as next week is going to have. I truly do not believe that there has been a game in the rivalry that is going to have this much stakes as it pertains to basketball. Which again, that's our quick preview on Auburn. Joey, I'll let you have Joey or Charles if you guys have any other quick thoughts on it. I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Yeah, I'm good. I'll save it for next week.
Okay.
We'll get to the pigs.
Yeah. Charles, go ahead with Arkansas.
There's no doubt Arkansas's got talent. And I don't think there can't be any question as far as John Calipari that he's always able to get talent. That talent maybe hasn't always meshed together well. And maybe some of the things that he tries to do are a little bit outdated, but this is still a very talented basketball team. And what you saw last Saturday when they played at Kentucky, when they had a common goal, having each other's back, like they can play really, really good basketball. I mean, it obviously helped that they went 13 of 25 from the 3-point line and only had 7 turnovers compared to Kentucky's 13 turnovers. And Kentucky shot the ball well from the 3-point line too. They were 10 of 23. They didn't shoot the ball well from the free throw line. They were 9 of 18, where Arkansas was 12 of 16. But it was kind of talked about on that broadcast, the 3 guys that came over from Kentucky, Thoreau, DJ Wagner, Big Z, they had great games and they were on a mission. So coming off of that game, they'll play at Texas I think this will come out on Wednesday. So tonight, before having their first game back in Fayetteville against us, we will be coming in with the number 3 in front of our name. So is that a huge motivating factor to them? I kind of expect for Arkansas fans, beating Alabama is a really big deal right now, just because how that rivalry or how these games have kind of played out, the whole Musselman and Oates back and forth, just as far as getting talent and having really good teams and, what's more important, getting to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or Final Four, what's more important, getting to the NCAA tournament, getting a deep run in the NCAA tournament or winning SEC regular season championship. So 7 o'clock game on ESPN. I'm sure Ravitch and Jimmy Dykes are going to be on the call. It's just what Arkansas team is going to show up. Even if Arkansas's best team does show up, we have got the team to compete with them and still beat them. but I think that's still the huge question mark as far as this Arkansas team. And just to talk about John Calipari a little bit, I was something that was really interesting to me coming off the Kentucky game. There was a clip of Reed Shepherd where he's wearing an Arkansas t-shirt and Kentucky shorts, and he's getting questions about it and just saying John Calipari was my coach. Tata Washington kind of getting on Twitter and talking about how Calipari went into Rupp Arena and won and stuff like that. You know, Kentucky fans can obviously question the success that Calipari had at the end, as far as maybe not having some deep runs with Kentucky teams that he should have, or just not being able to control the SEC like he did when he originally got into the conference. But I don't think you can question the fact that John Calipari has great relationships with his players and does a great job of getting talent. So it's very possible that game last weekend against Kentucky is a rallying cry for this team, and they start winning these games that they should win. Not saying that our game coming up is a game that they should win, but that this is a better team than what their SEC record has shown. And they might have hit a turning point, of course, in their season with that Kentucky win. So very interested to see what they do tonight against Texas. Thoreau's averaging 16 points a game. Wagner's averaging 10 points a game. Boogie Flam was averaging 15, but he's now out for the year. So they've got some guys like Nelly Davis, who was at Florida Atlantic for a long time. He's got to step up more. Big Z's got to start making shots. Carter Knox has got to start doing some things. They got Jonas Adu, who was at Tennessee last year. Like, it's a very talented team, and I expect Bud Walton Arena to be very excited for this game, for it to be very energized. And of course, us coming off of a week where we do need this rest, and this rest is good for us, does some rust come with that too, especially early on. Not getting in a hole, being able to start out strong, I think would go a long way to us putting another win in the win column on Saturday night when we head up to Fayetteville.
Yeah, and I'll say this before I talk about the Arkansas game. Speaking on the John Calipari piece with the players and guys going and repping whatever universities at now, right? Like Reed Shepherd. And I don't like to talk about football a lot on this. If Nick Saban were to have gone to another college, right? Do you not think that guys that Nick Saban coached, specifically defensive backs, right, would not go and support that coach? I think Marlon Humphrey has been a very loud voice in regards to this on Twitter, as far as, if Saban would have retired, would he have left? And he's like, yeah, immediately I would have left. You look at like guys like Caleb Downs, who left Alabama not because they didn't like Alabama, but because their coach left, right? And went to Ohio State because he felt more comfortable with whatever coaching staff that was there, right? So for Kentucky fans that are upset, and I think Alabama fans in the same voice would be, or the same sentence would be, upset if Nick Saban's players did that too. Like, that probably would have happened, and it's just the nature of, you have a legendary coach that maybe guys aren't going to Kentucky because it's Kentucky. Maybe guys are going to Kentucky because of Cal and what he can do for them to get in the NBA. At the same time, that's what Nick Saban did. Maybe guys weren't going to Alabama because it's Alabama. Maybe they're going to Alabama because it's Nick Saban. And so Alabama fans have kind of gotten that type of, not necessarily to the same level where we have our players wearing other teams' gear, because Nick Saban's not coaching anywhere else. But I believe that probably would have happened if Nick Saban had hypothetically gone to another school or another university. But going to Arkansas, just their game, like you said, they're very talented. I think Arkansas has probably one of the top 5 highest NIL budgets, and they definitely used it this year to get the talent that they have on the team. That's not saying that they aren't a good team. That's just saying that they have a lot of talent, and the talent really hasn't meshed well up until this point, at least until the Kentucky game, which you kind of saw what Arkansas looks like. Do they continue that success? That remains to be seen. like I said about Alabama, I think it's kind of unrealistic to expect Arkansas to shoot, what'd you say, 13 of 25 from three. I think that's unrealistic. That's above 50%. That's just not normal in basketball in general. And if they do shoot that well, then hats off to Arkansas. That's if that's the way we lose because they shoot 13 of 25 again, then hats off, right? Like you can't really do much to prevent that type of shooting performance. Um, I do think that Alabama having the week off or the midweek off is helpful. Alabama's dealing with a few guys with injuries with LeBaron Philon, Darian Reed coming back from his ankle injury. LeBaron Philon had sustained an ankle injury a couple weeks ago, and he's working back from that. So I do think that this break is probably the perfect time for Alabama. But like Charles, you said, it's crucial for Alabama not to get off to a slow, rusty start like we kind of saw or like we've kind of seen from Alabama in home games, but not so much in road games. So um, this is a big week, a big game for Alabama to kind of set the tone the rest of the way, the rest of the season. So looking forward to it, and it's no gimme game. It really isn't. It's a prove it game. I think for me for Alabama. Joey.
Yeah, I'll go back to what you said early on. You can't afford to lose either of these games, these next two coming up. And that with this stretch, you need to get as many wins as you possibly can. And setting the tone early with two road wins, no less, will go a really long way of ensuring that double bye that we all really want come conference, come the tournament. So, you know, like y'all both touched on and I did earlier, this is going that Arkansas is coming off of a very emotional game, which Coach Cal, which I won't get into because you already talked about that enough. Um, Coach Cal as well has also had, he and Nate Oates have had a kind of a funny relationship, since Oates came to the conference. I am interested to see if it's the same kind of manner with him now at Arkansas and now with Musk on. But if anything about Coach Cal's teams, they're always quite scrappy. And now with Boogie, we've talked about earlier about we've struggled against teams that have one guy that can really go off. With Boogie Fland now out, you kind of have to turn over and look at Thiero because he's he is the main guy on the offense for them. Not to mention he also leads the team in rebounds, so he's great on the defensive end of the floor as well. But he could be the guy that presents the problem, like you were talking about, Charles. The one, if he has a career game, then that could be an issue. But yeah, I really do think that Alabama can win this game, though. Arkansas has had, its share of, I don't want to call them issues. I'd rather call them growing pains this year. This is a program that, it might have grown a little bit too fast under Muss, but now they have Coach Cal there, and it might take a year or two to get up to where they want to be, but they are a program capable of getting big wins like that, like this Saturday would be. So, I also think it's great that they're playing Texas tomorrow because that'll be a good preview for us for next week. But overall, I think this is a game that Bama can win. I think it won't be easy, but I think with how we've been playing on the road, particularly with decent starts, it's probably a good thing that we're playing Arkansas on the road this year and not at home. I think that's really going to help us, and so I don't feel like I'm as down on this game as maybe you guys are. But what do I know? I'm going to choose to be positive because Bama's proven me wrong time and time again this season so far.
Do you think that Calipari will use the same defensive strategy that he did last year when we were at Kentucky? I think we started like 4-4 or 4-5 from three, but then they really made a concerted effort to run us off the 3-point line. And if we were making a drive, that guys were not leaving a man outside the 3-point line, that they were still staying on them and not collapsing to help. Do you think he tries to employ the same strategy this year? Do you think he's got the guys to be able to do something like that? And if they do, what is your comfort level with what we've got inside Cliff, Grant, somebody like Chris Youngblood taking it to the rim? Obviously, Mo Diabate with the off-road package, Jared Stevenson being able to bat guys down now. What do you expect from Arkansas defensively Saturday night?
Yeah, I think last year for Alabama, that was a good idea or a good game plan because Alabama wasn't particularly good at finishing at the rim. I think when they got into their Final Four run, I think that they did a much better job. You also didn't have an interior presence like Cliff. I think Grant was probably your best option, and he was okay, average at best. Now you have Cliff. You have if Aiden Terrell continues to play like he did, you have him. Mo Diabate is really coming on strong as far as getting to the rim, being physical, being that kind of interior presence for Alabama. Jaron Stevenson has done a pretty good job at that as well. Um, if you if Cal does that what he did last year at Kentucky versus Alabama, I think that it's going to be a long night for Arkansas because if you run Alabama off the 3-point line, they've shown that they're more than capable of getting to the rim, getting a body on you, getting to the foul line. Um, and unlike last year, where I don't think that they were very good at doing that, I think Alabama's kind of exceptional, and that's kind of where their offense is predicated on, is getting to the rim, getting to the foul line, getting those kick out shots. So if he does that, I think that it's going to be a long night for Arkansas, in my opinion.
Alabama also has a lot more length than they did last year. I really like us on inside, and I'm gonna give Grant some credit for last year. Like you said, Christian, is he was okay, not good, but we also have to remember that Grant was very overworked at the five
Yeah.
last year. He was playing a position that he I think he did a pretty dang good job considering that he's not really a natural five. But um, I think I really like our inside presence a lot more this year. I mean, that's kind of duh. But I really think that this team has the ability to adapt a lot better, shifting from, maybe a 3-point heavy offense to having to adjust to drive to the basket. I think they're a lot more capable this year than they were last year. It wouldn't surprise me to see Cal try to implement that if we're hot. I don't think he starts the game with that strategy, but I could see him adjusting if we are decent from the 3-point line early. But all that takes is a quick, under 12 timeout for Oates to make that adjustment and fix that up right. So I think they have a solid defense. No doubt Cal is going to coach a good game because he's a really, really good basketball coach, but I don't necessarily think it's going to have that big of an impact. I think this team can adjust a lot better.
I'm going to be very interested too. This going back 2 years ago when we had a good big in Charles Bediako. We put him a lot in the pick and roll action, and Shibwe got caught up, and we got easy rolls for lobs to Bediako. So do you put? I mean, obviously you put somebody like Cliff in that action, and are they still somebody like Big Z or Adu? Are they still slow to roll on something like that, and we get some nice easy look at the basket? That's probably one thing about Calipari's teams over the past couple of years. They have not been very good defensively. This team for KenPom defensive numbers, 33 in the country, which is probably one of the better defensive teams that Cal has had as it relates to KenPom rankings over the past couple of years. But I'm just very interested to see what they put out as far as the defensive strategy and how we attack it, because I agree that we have multiple ways to attack you defensively this year, that we don't just have to rely on threes and straight line drives, that we have started to adjust a little bit to putting guys on a block or, starting out from the elbow or the short corner and backing a guy down to get a good look at the rim. And like you said, too, we're getting more contact because we're able to take on more contact. And you got to imagine if we're shooting more free throws than Arkansas, they're not going to be calling the hogs. They may be calling the officials hogs, but they're going to be calling something. And I don't think it's a lot of pleasantries towards the men in stripes from the Arkansas crowd if that happens.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This was one that I kind of had circled going into the season. Obviously, Arkansas is kind of not performed as well as we kind of expected. That doesn't mean that they're not a good team, right? Um, Outside of that, just real fast, some interesting results currently going on in the SEC. I think Vanderbilt's currently beating Florida at Florida. And then Kentucky is losing by 13 at Ole Miss. So interested or interesting results currently. Obviously, this is in the first half, so things can change, and I expect them to. Charles, what's the women's schedule look like this week?
That's a great question because they did bounce back on Sunday with a huge win against Georgia after struggling a little bit up in Lexington, which Kentucky does have a very good women's program too. I think they were number 12 in the country at the time. Pulling it up real quick. So my apologies for the delay. Somebody who is performing really well for the women's team is Sarah Ashley Barker. She has been really good once she's gotten back from injury, um, putting a lot of points on the board for us. So, looking at our schedule at Florida on, let's see, the 6th would be Thursday. Very winnable game for us, probably a game that we should win. We're currently 5-4 in the conference, but all of our losses have been to really good ranked SEC teams. Florida's 12-11 overall, 3-6 in the conference. This is a game that we should win. And then on Sunday, there we are in Starkville against Mississippi State, who not as good as they've been in the past when they were making the Final Fours, but still a quality opponent. That game will probably be a little bit more of a coin flip, but continuing to play well. They've got a stretch right here where probably need to win these next 3 games because they will finish at Tennessee. Auburn's a very winnable game at home. LSU at home will be very tough, and then you're at Oklahoma. So winning these next 3 would get you to 8-4. I think just need one more to, at minimum, be 500, if not above 500 for SEC play as they head into the women's SEC tournament. And I don't know what the percentages would be right now, but I would think they're very, very close to locking up an at-large bid to the NCAA women's tournament just with the resume and the wins and what they've done this year.
Which would be what, 3 years in a row?
3 years in a row, and there's still the potential for them to get to that 4 line in a region and be hosting that regional in Tuscaloosa. Currently, right now, they're considered a 6 seed, where they would be going to Columbus and playing Ohio State. But that region or regional would be in Birmingham, Alabama. So, whether they get to host in Tuscaloosa or they find a way where they may have to pull an upset or two, but then having a home crowd in Birmingham potentially for Sweet 16 and Elite Eight games, that'd be something really cool for this team. And I think for Alabama women's basketball fans and Alabama fans in general to have the opportunity to support this team in Birmingham.
It'd also be really cool, just thinking in the future. I don't know if this is even possible with Auburn playing as well as they are. Um, there's the Sweet 16 Elite Eights in Atlanta, I believe. What for the men's side? I think it's Atlanta, Minneapolis, Newark, and somewhere out west, I believe. As far as the Sweet 16 Elite Eight sites, I don't think unless Alabama somehow can jump Auburn, which is possible. You play them twice, right? There's a possibility that Alabama could do something and Auburn could falter. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but I think Auburn's a really, really good team. Um, and I mean, if you think about it, Alabama women's playing in Birmingham, Alabama men's playing in Atlanta. Like, if you're an Alabama fan, that's one, not a lot of travel relative to last year, where you had to go out to LA and Seattle, or not Seattle. Where was it in
Spokane.
Washington? Spokane, right? And then 2, you know, just having the home crowd for any potential Sweet 16 Elite Eight game would be absolutely amazing. So, fingers crossed something happens there with both the women's and men's team. If you have an opportunity to go and watch the games, do so. If you can't watch them in person, watch them on TV. I've watched quite a few games this season of the women's side. But overall, just really excited about the direction of both men's and women's basketball at Alabama. It's a really good time to be alive, really good time to be a supporter of those programs. But did we miss anything? This is a little bit longer than kind of what we expected.
You know, just since it's February 3rd and that the NCAA would have enough time to prepare for this, I just want to mention that should you put Alabama and Auburn on opposite sides of the NCAA bracket and they both make it to the Final Four and then meet in the national championship, there's enough time to move the game to Larry Langford's Dome Stadium that he was going to build in Birmingham. And if that doesn't work out, I'm sure Legacy Arena would be just fine for that national championship game. So just wanted to put that on the NCAA's radar. You know, maybe they can build a dome over Protective Stadium real quick too, if that doesn't work out. But make it a little, you know, instead of sending three Alabama teams all the way out to the West Coast like they did last year in Auburn, UAB, and Alabama, maybe bring it a little bit closer if both of them were in the national championship game.
Well, Sanford also got sent out, I think, to
So I think
Colorado.
so they went out to Denver. Yeah.
Yeah, so they sent all of the Alabama teams out west. I think in order for, and I'll throw one last shot. In order for Auburn and Alabama to meet in the national championship, Bruce Pearl's going to finally have to get out of the first weekend for the first time in 6-7 years. So I don't know if we're
First
banking on
time
that.
since the first time
Yeah.
since the Final Four.
I don't know. I don't know if we should be banking on that per se. So remains to be seen. But other than that, I think for our schedule, we'll have a post game space following the game on Saturday, and then we'll have a post game space on, is it Wednesday or Tuesday game for Texas?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. We'll have post game space following the Texas game. We probably won't do a podcast for those of you listening following the Arkansas game. I think we're going to have a special podcast specifically for the implications of the game next Saturday. Maybe have a special guest, and also maybe even do a pregame space with some Auburn people that we normally do them with. So I'll be on the lookout for that. Other than that, be sure to follow in our Twitter account. Be sure to like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Spotify and Apple, whichever way you like to listen to your podcasts. And other than that, I think we're good to sign off. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.